Trying this. Okay, I'm going live, so let's see if this works. The quality still looks like garbage. I'm not sure what that's about. I'm basically just trying to figure out my quality here. Let's see if I do a... It's like I'm watching myself stream myself. So it looks okay for me. It's not great. Okay, let's close that down. So, I see. Stream's bitrate is lower than recommended. Stream bitrate of 9,500 kilobytes per second. So is that something I can control, or does that have to do with the actual... Let's try this. Okay, I just upped my stream bitrate. I'm not sure if it's working yet or not. Yeah, I'm going into the buffering again. All right, well, I still don't know if this is figuring out the quality things, but I'm gonna go ahead and get started anyway. So let's bring this up here because I don't need that. We can make that smaller. Okay. My goal today is to get into some, I don't think I need terminal at the moment. We'll quit that. Okay. So last time oh, now I've got poor quality. Great. Okay, so let's just start it here. So last time I was streaming, I was kind of showing some of the how I get started when creating a new conference talk. And this talk is about statically typed PHP. So there's some new features in PHP that make it easier to do stronger type hinting, and there's some tools for static analysis in PHP that I want to talk about. And shooting to do a 45-minute, maybe 1 hour talk on this topic. Last time I kind of started out with an outline, my sort of tentative first outline, and I've definitely started to rethink some pretty major parts of that since then, which is totally what happens. It's pretty typical when I get started on a new talk idea. I might kind of come up with an initial outline and then start to sort of suss out what that's going to look like in practice and what I'm actually going to say. And I started to realize that I was not super jazzed about the hook, and there was a lot of stuff I talked about with like showing the history of statically typed languages that just none of that ended up seeming that interesting to me. I'm a pretty pragmatic, practical developer in that I like talks that are focused on things that I can like go take home and start using to improve my life as a developer. And so I think I want to do a talk that's in that same vein, that is I don't know, like kind of I want to hook people on inspiring them to try making their code better using type hinting and static analysis. I was watching a talk on MIT's website about how to speak, and a couple things stood out to me. I took a bunch of notes, but a couple things stood out to me. One was start with some kind of empowerment promise. So that means, what am I going to show people? What are you going to be able to do after this talk that you couldn't do before? So I've got some ideas for that. And then the other big thing that I took away from there was this how to be remembered section. And he, the author kind of said, pick a symbol that people can kind of keep coming back to, pick a slogan, so some kind of memorable line that people will remember and take home and be like, oh, you're that guy who said this. Surprise them. You want a salient idea that sticks out. I think just strong typing in PHP is going to be a salient enough idea on its own. I don't think I'd have to come up with anything there. And then a story. And I think that's where maybe the code samples are going to come in. So as I was thinking about this, like symbol, I'm not quite sure. Maybe some kind of visual, I don't know, visual like hallmark or something like that. A mascot almost is what I'll think of it as. For the slogan, I've been playing around with thinking about the idea of like, I'm a lazy programmer, and just be proud of that, and basically say like, I hate writing code where I have to check the types on a bunch of different things because I don't know what the user is giving me. I hate digging through code and trying to figure out what type I'm supposed to pass things. Am I supposed to pass an array or an object or what have you? So I'm a lazy programmer, so I like to leave a trail or something like that. I don't know. Maybe that trail idea could be our mascot. I don't know. Okay. Surprise. Not quite sure what I want to do on a surprise yet. Maybe this could be some of the gotchas in PHP, PHP's typing and static analysis tools, some of the things that are kind of tricky about this. The salient idea is like doing less, not less work, but like more accurate or more correct code, maybe, without writing more code. Something like that. And then story is going to be the code samples. So we may keep coming back to this document, but basically as I started thinking about things in terms of that, it started to like, things started clicking with me, and I started to like have this vision almost for what I want, how I want to introduce this topic. So kind of going back to my goals initially here, I want to inform people on how strong typing and stack analysis tools work in PHP, and then I want to inspire people by showing them how they can start using this today, even if their code base is not fully in support of this, because a lot of this you can sort of incrementally bring into your code base, and so that might be the story with the code samples and stuff. So I kind of, first thing I just wanted to touch on is I'm kind of revisiting the goal. And I think the goal is really making your code better by taking advantage of type hinting and static analysis in PHP. And better can mean a lot of things, so this might be something I want to refine that idea. But basically just being a better developer by using the things the language and tools give to us, rather than writing code that makes you remember things. And I want to start with some kind of hook or promise. I'm not sure exactly what that is yet. I mean, that maybe the goal is kind of the hook or promise, make your code better by taking advantage of type hitting and static analysis in PHP. I do think this what is static typing needs to happen. So I dug into this further since the last time I streamed here, just kind of going into like some of the different the correct words around different ideas in static typing. So compiled versus interpreted, programming language, strong versus weak typing, which is a little bit amorphous, implicit versus explicit typing, which was one I didn't really have in my list last time, static versus dynamic typing. So I do want to spend some time going over these definitions. I'm going to put this in like section 1, but my section 0 is going to be like an illustration of why the of why. Yeah. So an illustration of why. And this is going to be the hook, uh, basically, where I'm just trying to give people like a really tangible example and reason to keep watching or to pay attention. So one thing that I kind of took away from this talk I was watching was about how to speak better was people are in the first 5 or 10 minutes, they're kind of getting settled. They're trying to figure out if they care about looking or listening to you, if they care about what you're saying, if they care about the topic at all. And if they don't, they're going to plug into their laptop and be out. And if they do care, they are going to hang around and they're going to have questions. And so the illustration of why needs to be some kind of like, I want to do like a really basic code example of how code gets more complex and harder to trace, maybe, or as I go. So, for example, kind of, I think we can do some PHP right here. Yeah. So, what I was thinking was something like, let's say I'm starting out on a new project and I have I'm going to start out just with a class or just a function that is like get, what do we want to get? What's this project about? Let's say it's get plants. And that is this because I'm going to be like counting all the plants in my house. Okay, so I have this new function called get plants, and why isn't that making, I don't know why that's happening. Oh man, PHP Storm, killing me here. Maybe I can't do this. That's weird. Maybe you can't do this in a markdown file very well. Maybe it doesn't like that. Let's try my Scratch file. Okay. So I have a function called getPlants, and in this function I want to for each plant in plants been writing too much JavaScript. Where the for loops are different. So for each plants as plant, and we will make plants just an array of plants that I have in my house. I don't think I have daisies, but whatever. So I've got 3 plants for each plant as plant. Let's add them to a collection. So and so we'll just do collection add plant. Okay, and put this inside of here so it actually knows what it is. Zoom out a little so we can actually see it. We can close that. So, okay. So let's say that we have a function like this where we get plants, and then we're going to return our collection, right? So there's a number of things that are unclear from just calling this function. So if I say, let's do, how should I log? I guess it's, I'm used to having Laravel where you can just do die dump. Maybe I'll install that, but what is it? Print R is what I was thinking. So let's say I print R, whatever the result of get plants is. And in this case, I'm going to get a new collection object with all my plants in it. So let's space these out a little so you can read it. Okay, so there's a bunch of problems here. Like what is a collection? What does that mean? What methods are available on it, right? Like I haven't typed into this. I'd have to go trace the collection to figure out what that looks like. Plants are, it's an array of strings, but like, how do I know that? And if I wanted to change that to be an array of objects, how would I do that? And so we start off with this really basic function where you can look at the whole thing, but as we imagine it getting more and more complex, so let's say, maybe actually what we do is use something like the basic function is just return, and then it's a list of strings, right? Or array of strings. And that's get plants. So all seems easy, but then you realize that the getting plants as an array of strings isn't quite accurate because your plants need to be an object. So now we do a class called plant, and it is going to have some properties called name. We do public name. It's going to have watering schedule, whatever that is. It's going to have color. Okay. So it's got some properties on it. And so now let's say that we want to return an array of objects. So now what we might do is new plant with cactus. We want to do new plant with yucca and a new plant with daisy. And so now we're getting an array of plant objects. And we assume that plant objects have some kind of constructor that takes in a name and sets it equal to this name equals name. Okay. So with no type hinting anywhere, we don't know that this is returning us an array of plants. We don't know that we can actually, this is going to probably get more complex. We're going to have a static class called plant factory. Oh, that's right. You just do static methods within it. So we'll call this create. So if we want to create static function create a plant, we give it a name, and this is going to give us back new plant. So it's going to pass the name in there. Okay, so we're getting more and more complex. We need to do our plant factory create, and we're going to do that separately instead of having new plants. So this is getting from this simple, what used to just be returning an array of strings, which is maybe how your project starts out. It's slowly getting more and more complex. And you've now introduced a factory with a create method that returns you a plant. You're now calling this for each plant, so you're getting a new plant object. And if you want to figure out what this getPlants method actually returns, you now have to trace through a couple different layers in order to see that. And this continues happening. And if you take this example to the extreme, what happens is you end up tracing through dozens or hundreds of layers and going into vendor directories just to figure out what type and what options are available to you in any call that you make, any method call you make. And so this is one of the maybe the central problems that static analysis and type hinting seeks to solve. Instead of having to make sure that you've got the right variables the whole way through, you can now sort of rely on not only the IDE, but rely on static analysis tools to check and catch any errors you have. Okay, so that's kind of something like that is going to be my hook. I think I need to refine that a little more, and I need to figure out how it fits into, I'm actually going to maybe call this file hook. Oh, whoops. Okay. And yeah, so now we've got a sort of hook example. So we have our V1 and then V2, and then there could be like V3, and then there could be V4, and I could just slowly show the complexity ramping up as it goes, and show that like I guess the thesis here is the mental energy required to reason about the problem gets higher and higher as code gets more complex. And we want to, one of our big challenges as programmers is to mental energy required. So that's why we build abstractions. That's why we write tests. That's why we break our code up into classes and functions and use well-named variables, is to lower the mental energy required. But another tool that I'd like to add to your tool belt, ooh, I like this. Another tool you can add to your tool belt, even in PHP, is static analysis and type hinting, or let's call it static typing, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, this the whole talk is your code gets more complex, and as it gets complex, it gets harder and harder to trace. And mentally, the mental energy required to solve any problem gets higher and higher the more complex you go. And so when you need to do something like significant refactoring, the mental energy required is just enormous, and it's really hard to get into this problem and know that you've solved it, and you're almost bound to miss things. And this is partly why we do things like break our code up into smaller and smaller bits. It's why we write tests. It's why we are using well-named variables. So, yeah. Write tests, use well-named variables, and break code up into chunks of some kind. Yeah, but one of the other things we can do here is static analysis, static typing. So that's my hook. And then get into this, what is static typing? And then I want to kind of cover some of these things like strong versus weak typing, type hinting, implicit versus explicit, type hinting, and coercion, and then static and dynamic typing. So I want to get into the details of all of those things. I have kind of started to put some examples in here of some things that wouldn't get caught by certain things. There's languages. I was thinking about making my first maybe like audience interaction about this point. So I kind of go like, there's the hook. There is the introduction to the terminology, key terminology. There's audience interaction next. So the kind of next section. And this goes into like, okay, I'm going to give you an example in a language, and you tell me if it's dynamic or interpreted. One of the other variables, like, so interpreted, strong versus weak, implicit versus explicit. Okay, so JavaScript is dynamic, interpreted, implicit, and what was that? I think it's also weakly typed because, yeah. Python is dynamic, interpreted, implicit, and strongly typed. Java is, what are we saying? Compiled, static. I think Java's explicit, but there's like an asterisk there where like you can get around it. And then it is strongly typed, so I don't think you can coerce or like change the types of things. I think I need to double check that. And I kind of want to go into some of these other languages too. I need to check all these though. So my goal is to show people like, here's a bunch of other programming languages and how how they fit into these different paradigms. So I've got kind of these 4 paradigms I'm going to define, and then I'm going to show some examples. Maybe I'll show an example of the code and be like, okay, this is Java. Does anybody know, is this, where does this fall on the list? And maybe some kind of sliders that people can play with. So I want to make this a little bit fun. And then the last bit here is now let's bring it back to PHP specifically. Oh man, I can't spell it all. Specifically is, what do I mean when I say static PHP? I'm going to say type hinting, stricter typing, or gradual typing, and then static analysis tools can be used. We'll look at. I'm just dumping the history stuff. I think that I didn't like it. It doesn't seem that interesting. Again, going back to getting into the hook here, which is why do I care? And then what is static typing? Kind of give me some definitions, get some audience interaction in here. And then let's bring it around to PHP specifically. And then I actually think some kind of history of typing in PHP is a good idea. Because it's good to have some context here. It's pretty, it hasn't come out of nowhere. This isn't all new stuff here. So I think it's going to be helpful to include what is currently in PHP's type hinting system, and then what is outside of it, so actually this should really be what is currently implemented in PHP's type hinting system, what is not yet implemented, and what do third-party tools provide? Okay. Okay, I'm just kind of putting all this in the right sections here, I think. Okay, and then not yet implemented, we're gonna get into some of these things. I already put these in here, so PHP 8 is gonna have union types, generics, and then I need to do some more. And then what do third-party tools provide? And that's where we have static analysis stuff. Okay, so this is kind of overview. So what I'm feeling like this talk is going to become, or what it had the feel of this talk is going to be: present a little information, get a little interaction, present a little information, get a little interaction. I want this to be I want there to be plenty of space for people to pop in and out and jump back in and be oh, that's useful at any time. So there's a little bit of education, just pure lecture, but then there's hopefully a lot of jumping into examples too. So it's we started off with example of why this matters. Then we get into, okay, here's a little bit of definition, some technical terms, and then boom, audience interaction. Let's start talking about it. Let's get some maybe conversation going, because there's some of these are actually kind of debatable, which will be fun. And then let's get back into some education. Okay, when we talk about PHP specifically, this is what we mean when we say static PHP or static typing in PHP. Here's what's offered. Here's what's not yet implemented. There's some things third-party tools can do. And then the next thing is, let's get into the actual examples. So how can this make your code better? So this is where I want to like maybe build up a project maybe take a complex project and almost refactor it to use types and show some of the advantages there, or maybe just build a project up from scratch that gets gradually more and more complex and uses more and more of these features of type hinting and static analysis as it gets bigger. And then kind of back to the education, some of these weird shortcomings and quirks. And then maybe kind of go back to like, I don't know what I call this. I don't want to say it's like conclusions, but like, yeah, I'm going to call it conclusion, but it's going to be something there that's like a kind of a restatement of that hook. Like, get excited. This is useful. This is what it can do. I'm just going to say restate the hook for now. Okay. Okay, so this outline, I'm getting excited about it. I like feel like this is a lot closer to the direction that I want this talk to go in. I want it to be super super tactical. Like, you can take this stuff home. I want it to be something that is maybe you could take just a snippet of it and still get really value, even if you didn't pay attention the whole time. Because like the reality is, like at a conference or a webinar or whatever, however I deliver this, like people are going to be in and out, right? Like, nobody is 100% plugged in, paying attention for 45 minutes. It's just so, I mean, it's hard to do that. And so people jump in and out, and you want them to have, I want them to have a good place to hook back in and feel like, oh yeah, I see what's going on here. Okay, great. This is useful. This is useful. I also might want to be able to break this up and like turn it into some small pieces of content. So maybe this section on examples, like each one of these could be, let's see, whoops. Each one of these examples could be like its own little mini lesson that I record as a video later. So there's definitely a lot of potential there. Okay, so I feel like I am pretty good on the outline part of this. There's definitely more that. There's definitely more. More that. Sorry, I'm just thinking through what else I want to include. There's definitely more I could include in that outline, but I think it's going to get more clear as I get further along. So I kind of mentioned in the opening video, I've got a talk that I want to get ready, and then I've got an article that I want to write as well. This is sort of, we're going to call this live stream 1.5. We're doing outline and research part 2. And yeah, we'll call it. And let's see, my next, so next time what I want to do is come through with code samples. So I actually want to start building up the repository of code samples that I am going to use for this talk. We kind of already did one with the hook, just showing like increasing complexity in a project. I think we could probably go ahead and just build it. I'm gonna do this further. I want to get wild with this. So here's what I want to do. I'm gonna uncomment this out. Okay. So V1 is you have a method that is called getPlants. It returns an array of strings. Okay. You realize that that's not really quite good enough, and that you need a let's say you realize V2 more than just a name for each plant. So you build a plant object or class, that has a, let's just do it initially. It's got properties, right? Something really simple, because you're not trying to make this, you're not trying to make this too complex. So this is really shitty. I wouldn't write code like this in real life. New plant name is cactus. Why doesn't it like that? What am I doing wrong? Can't use temporary expression in right context. I think what this is saying is I have to do this in 2 parts. Okay. So I'm going to create a cactus, a yucca, and a daisy. Okay. I'm going to return those. Okay, so this is V2. I realize I need more than just a name, and so I create this array of objects called plants, and now I am, see, oh yeah, it just doesn't like that I have this declared multiple times. That's okay. So now I'm instantiating each of the plants, and then I'm returning an array of the plants. Okay, that's fine for a while, but then I realized that like V3, I want more plants. This method is going to get huge. Lots of duplicated code. So I create a factory. All right. So I've still got my class called plant. I'm going to put a, I'm not going to do the constructor yet. What I'm going to do is, this is a plant, is a new plant. And then plant name is name. And then I return the plant. Okay. So now I've got a plant factory that creates new plants. And now when I do get plants, I am gonna do this. Okay, so that's V3. I want more plants. This is getting less complicated, or more. This is getting less easy to follow because now I've got 2 layers. And then maybe I realize in V4 that arrays are a poor data structure for this. Let's use collections. And so we import a third-party collection library because we don't want to build our own. So for that, I'm not going to, maybe I won't type the, I'll have to go pick the library and figure it out. I know there are, some collection generation libraries. I know like you can download like Laravel's collection generation library on its own. So we're still going to have our plant and plant factory, and now get plants instead is going to return a new collection, and it is going to get created from an array maybe. And now if we want to reason about what plants is, and we want to see what get plants gets us, we have to go figure out what this collection is, what methods are available, and it's getting more and more complicated. And now in V5 we want some, like, let's say we need a default filter on the plant collection, or we want to provide, this will be good, provide options for filtering our plant collection. So now what we're going to do is everything we have up to this point, but we're going to do get plants and have some options here. And now what we need to do is have some kind of, let's say it's, there's a lot of ways you could do this, but let's do something like in our collection is going to, or we're going to get the collection, the whole collection. Let's create a new function called filter options. We'll call it process options. Good generic name here. So process options, and that we're going to do some work and ultimately return a collection, okay? So it might be a new collection or it might be something like that. But anyway, the point being, now we have to know about this collection. We have to know what this plant factory has. We have to know what this process option goes through and does. What are these expected options? This has become a really tricky thing. What happens when you have a complex set of options? And all of this is very familiar feeling because this is a large part of what programming is dealing with these complexities, right? So maybe our final like V6 will be using type hinting to what do we want to call this? Like make it to prevent errors. Let's say using type hinting and static analysis to prevent errors and misuse and misunderstanding. Okay, so then in this final one, maybe what we do is we do something where this is type hinted as an options object and the process options should take only an options object, and the collection should be well, this isn't possible in PHP, but this would be like something not yet possible, but cool, would be neat if we could do. Okay, so anyway, the point being, we can now know, like we could build the type hints into all of these. So it's a collection of plants. See, I really wish PHP had generics like that. It'd be super awesome. So we will just do a collection. We'll say not yet possible collection of plant. Yeah. And yeah, so we'll show how the type hinting is going to prevent us from passing in improper things. Like let's say that instead of passing in that options object, someone passed in an array of options or a string that was just like a query string of all the options. This would immediately tell you that that was wrong before it would tell you it was wrong at runtime. It wouldn't wait and like try to process those options and throw some fatal error. It would say the typing is wrong. So you're not even giving me the right type of object. And if you add static analysis tools on top of that, it's not only going to tell you it's the wrong type that you passed in, it's also going to do that before you ever are able to push your code out to a server. So that's the kind of thing we want to show people we can do. Okay, so that's all the code examples I'm going to do for now, because I think that's the bulk of what I want to spend time on in the next live stream. So this time we're kind of doing outline part 2, a little bit of the hook. and now live stream 3. So next time we're going to get into deeper look at code samples. So thanks all for joining me. Hopefully I'm getting a little better at this. I am definitely trying to figure it all out, and see you next time.